Hello and welcome to the final episode of Animediate, for reals this time, in which we end on the end of Evangelion, quite fittingly. This is the replacement or supplementary, depending on your point of view, ending to the TV series, in which the show takes a much more, I guess you could say, literal interpretation of events, yet still imagines to use a lot of abstract imagery and hits to convey its message, and is sort of regarded as the more cynical take. But before we get into the review proper, the soul of Adam has been reborn because of the second impact, and the angel Jono has split himself into. So we have an extra surprise guest for this final episode.
Yeah, we've got my brother Andrew.
Hello.
We're gonna have to beat him in a musically timed dance action sequence because John.
I hope you've been playing enough Dance Revolution together to beat us, because we're pretty synchronized.
Hey, I've been staying up image training this whole night. Yeah, Jonna didn't want to be the only one who didn't like it, so he called in reinforcements to make it a fair fight.
No, I mean, really, it sort of started because, you just walked in when I was beginning to start watching it over again. You were just like, yeah, I'll join, and then just kind of got caught in the hatred.
Yeah, I watched Neon Genesis Evangelion a few years ago because people were talking about it. I was vaguely aware it was meant to be good, so I watched it, got to the end of it, and was like, well, that was. Got no fucking clue, and then didn't think about it again for ages because I just, figured that was it, and then saw Jonathan was watching it and was like, maybe I'll finally understand what was going on, so I watched it with him, and no, I do kind of understand now because the film did answer some of my many questions, but yeah.
I mean, what you really needed to do was watch the entire library of End of Evangelion explained videos that are on YouTube. But we should give our own best shot at trying to summarize and explain this film.
I guess I've seen the show, a couple of times now. Basically, what happened is I didn't like anime. And then Tony decided to do a podcast years ago now, literally years ago, of oh yeah, we should all watch anime. And I was like, oh fuck, that sounds awful. And then it's been so long-winded that I've had my arc of actually liking anime now. On which Neon Genesis Evangelion pretty much started, because I watched that on my own last year and was like, oh, this is really good. And yeah, this film, I watched it for the first time again last year. I was in a lot of pain this day, physical pain, and then emotional pain, because I'd seen Killing of the Sacred Deer, which is a very bleak film, and then I was like, let's throw on End of Evangelion. So yeah, I did not feel good. It took me a while to kind of untangle it. It left me with very negative feelings. It still does, but I also think it's a masterpiece. It kind of does that Cinema at the New York thing for me, of just ruining my day. I watched it again just randomly last year because I hate myself. And then I watched it preparing for this podcast because I wanted to do all of Evangelion before we recorded the first episode. And then I watched it with Ethan the other night. And I must have been sitting in a weird position because then I went to bed that night physically in pain. My shoulder was fucked up.
It's the curse of this show.
Yeah, this is a cursed film that makes me feel really sad. But I also think it's really good, so I hope I actually get to talk about why. Anyone else want to take over?
I just want to joke that I feel like this has been, this is the first step in your arc of liking anime, and I think this for me is the beginning of the arc of me hating anime. It's mirrored. I've seen this and I'm like, is there anything? It's like complete opposite. This is the beginning. I'm going to become now the one in the podcast who hates anime.
Oh no, oh no.
I think it's because I've always kind of there's certain things about anime that have never sat right with me, and I think this film is a lot about a lot of those things, and I think that that definitely went some way in kind of changing my opinion on the art form, seeing someone kind of tackle the art form in a way like this. And I also think it just helps the way that the Evangelion is shot. It feels like live action. It's like well edited. It's not fucking too static, like really boring looking characters, like with a sword, and the guy's got like the single bit of hair that goes between his eyes, and so much anime was like that I had to watch for various reasons. But yeah, also I guess part of the anime redemption arc as well was watching Kill la Kill, the whole thing, and actually thinking it was okay. And that was a show I fucking couldn't stand. So I think it's just corrupted me, really. I've just been corrupted by it.
This is the plan, is eventually you just wear people down, and eventually like any like moral like grounds they have to like dislike something, you just you sand away those imperfections, and eventually people are a nice smooth egg.
But it wasn't just about wearing it down. I mean, it just got better. When I think about the anime that we did at the start of this podcast, well, okay, all right, sure. It got worse for a couple of people, but for me, it felt like every next step on this podcast, we were watching something that was better than what we had before, and it was a slow increase at first. It was very, very gradual. The first, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 shows didn't really leave anything much on me, apart from the memory of having to spend an entire season of watching it. But I mean, since we got, I think, to around Mob Psycho, it has just been, everything has been a step up from the time before, and it's just got better and better. And that's the benefit of starting with crap anime and ending with good anime. There's not much more to it than that.
I think our growth curve, if you could plot it on a flashing red screen with orange text saying like warning, warning, it would definitely not be linear. It would be quite exponential, you know. From like set below 5 is like close to the ground.
Yeah, it's definitely exponential. It's not a straight lined graph at all.
Is it geometric, Ethan? Is it quadratic?
Ethan, what do you think of the film?
I really thought the film was great. I didn't know what to expect. I think one of the few things that I knew about the film was... one of the things that really enticed me to this film before I'd watched it was knowing that it was meant to be a retelling or just another separate perspective of the last 2 episodes of the show. And I watched the last 2 episodes of the show, and I was like, how do you reinterpret this? The only way that you can is by showing, as Tony said, literal events happening in, I guess a world that, concretely exists instead of this strange space that kind of exists and doesn't exist. So that really drew me to the film a lot. But apart from that, I didn't really know what else to expect. I knew that Jonathan was going to hate it, just because that's all Harry seemed to be able to say about the film when we talked about it leading up to it. But I thought I really, really loved it a lot. And I think this film can be quite clearly split into 2 halves. And that's not just because the end credits of the film happen halfway through the film.
Oh, that was such a funny moment. Like, part of the reason I wanted to watch it with Ethan is because I knew that he would burst out laughing when, at like a really great moment, the credits just hit and the song starts. It's so funny.
But it wasn't just that. It was the fact that a great moment happens, and then it's like it cuts to black, and then there's just the classic Neon Genesis "To Be Continued" in the bottom right, and I was like, "This is a film. What is there to continue?"
It's literally the Simpsons gag.
It is. It is the Simpsons gag.
Yeah, it's like to be continued immediately.
I'll be honest, I was hoping that the credits would just continue for the next 40 minutes and then that would be the film, but...
Anyway, yes, so what I was saying was I think this film can be split quite evenly into 2 halves, where the first half is just a really, really solid kind of action thriller-esque story about a building kind of being taken over by another force, and the second half is maybe more closely aligned to the last two episodes of the show, where it gets a lot more abstract in visually, and it goes down the rabbit hole quite a bit. And to have those both of those worlds in one film really made me like it a lot. I was glad to have a shift like that, because I was kind of expecting it, to be honest. I didn't really know what the bulk of the film, sorry, was going to be about. But the fact that it starts off with Zila taking over Nerve was like, yes, this is this is really good. It actually kind of, in terms of its scale and what it's going for, it actually reminded me of the last couple of Avengers films. I don't know if any of you actually agree with that at all, where it feels like they are literally, pitting everyone against everyone, and it's just going to be a really, really phenomenal final showdown, basically, between all of the forces going on in the show.
But it's just a sort of farce of we've nuked it, and now we're sending in all of these missiles, and like our troops were there, and then they weren't there.
Yeah, it's because no one that dies in that attack is anyone we have any reason to care about, other than that they're wearing the uniforms that the three scientists we know are also wearing. And they're just gunned down mercilessly by faceless soldiers. And then they get to the, control room, and then the three guys we know that we've never seen do fighting before manage to hold them off indefinitely. Then there's an airstrike after they drop a mine on the place, and then we never see them having to fight again because they seem to be fine now. And I don't know, it just felt like it was just people were being shot to be like, look how edgy we are, killing people with blood and stuff. Ooh, and I didn't feel the weight of that. It was just like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Why are these people just killing all the scientists that built the stuff they wanted to have built?
Yeah, if they'd been better at handling the intrigue stuff, it would have been sort of more interesting for me. Sort of because I think what's going on is Sela is influencing either the UN or maybe the Japanese government to invade, because it's always vague on what exactly or who these are. But I don't know, I'd possibly be more involved if I was this is what has kind of been hinting at, that this shady organisation has these powers that it will unleash. But it's just sort of I don't know. I think it's one of the reoccurring problems I have with this film, is that it just always seems to pull something out of its arse every few seconds, and there's just no real way I felt of getting engaged in it, because it's gonna be solved or something else that you have no way of sort of thinking, oh, of course that's come up, or oh, that was hinted. It's just kind of oh, that's kind of happened.
I don't know. I think the big thing that happens, or one of the big things that happens in the first half, is all the mass production Avas get sent in, and there's a big fight scene with them, and that is one of the untied threads from the end of the TV show, where they just sort of mention that they everyone else except us has started making way more Avas, and Nerve are kind of woo, kind of worried about that. And I think that's a good scene as well, in my opinion.
They're in the TV series though, right near the end, they're yeah, some of the other places are putting their Avas into production. Oh well, and then in the film it's yeah, we had we've got 6 of them just ready to go. Without pilots or anything, we'll just drop them in. We've got that. We can do that. It's fine.
They have dummy plugs though, right? It's one of those you see as they're being dropped, the dummy plug goes in. And I think in their characterization, they are kind of bestial, right?
Yeah.
I think at that point it's kind of when we talked about the show originally, we kept kind of talking about the angel designs and all the parallels that get drawn between the Avas and the angels. And I think these are they basically are angels, even though they kind of are Avas. There's something really horrific. I think the designs are really cool, because they are absolutely disgusting.
Yeah, they're like vultures.
Yeah, vultures is a good way of putting it. And when we were watching it, I think the biggest parallel that I saw, it reminded me the most of, was they kind of look like the aliens from Alien, but also a bit like the flying creatures that the Nazgul ride on in Lord of the Rings, except they're obviously all white. And yeah, no, I completely agree. I think that there's something really kind of terrifying when you first see them, especially in the way that their face is designed. But I don't think there's anything quite as like stays with you as the scene where they're literally kind of disemboweling Asuka's Ava. It's just a horrific sight seeing that happen as they all kind of dive onto her and take their turns picking apart the mech suit.
Yeah, it's a very disgusting moment, which comes up right after a sick as fuck fight scene. You know, I think the point which Ava starts off, End of Ava starts off, is all the characters are at like some form of like basically bedrock, you know, mentally. They're all like at the lowest they've ever been, you know. Asuka's just in hospital and has zero sync rate. Shinji's will take 17 minutes to explain what he does, and Bray starts the film with like you see that the glasses she has from Kendo are broken on the floor, you know. So they've all like started from this like very low point, and to have that action like rising moment where Asuka like realizes the truth behind, you know, the absolute terror field, and realizes that, you know, that the soul of her mum was always watching over her, which is, you know, it's very nice that that's like something that inspires her, and it's like the closest thing we have in End of Ava to like a really like overall like unambiguously like, you know, positive like character development thing. And that is like the fact that inspires her, you know, to be like this proper like hero type. You know, the great moment where she's like, I've only got 5 minutes left on my battery, and then she says like, that's like 20 seconds each, you know, and runs at them, kills one of them, and it's like she's like one down or whatever, and and then it cuts away. It's like, it's great, you know, to see someone to you know, take charge, which is, you know, what Shinji, you know, essentially refuses to do.
I think it helps that Asuka as a character, like, it kind of plays with your kind of feeling towards her, in that when you first kind of start watching the show, like, she's a very entertaining character and mixes up the formula, but she is deliberately designed to kind of be quite annoying. And then I mean, I can't say for anyone else, but I know that I kind of liked her as it went on more and more, and kind of the idea of someone who's like really proud suddenly kind of failing, it was kind of really interesting to me, and I felt so sorry for her. Yeah, and then having her at her lowest at this point in the film, and then that moment of kind of catharsis when that song that kicks in. Well, it's a better version of the song because it's got like vocalists, even more vocalists now, kicks in, and she kind of instantly, her trauma is resolved somehow, you know, by realizing kind of what happened to her mother, and it kind of recontextualizes pretty much her trauma in a way that kind of really lifts her up. And then, yeah, like you say, you've got that great fight scene. It's also cut kind of back and forth between some really good scenes as well. The cross-cutting, I think, really works for me. So yeah, you build up this character to such a point of kind of elation, and then you just kind of, I think it's the spear comes in, and it just completely tears you down, you know. It's horrible. The spear comes in, and then all of the things that she's killed just get up, you know. It was for nothing. Tear her apart. I mean, it really is fucking with you, you know. And I think that this film does that, you know, completely kind of takes over your body and just plays with you and makes you feel like shit. And that's definitely one of the big moments of giving you this like really like positive catharsis and like enjoyable scene to just kind of destroying you, for me anyway.
But all of that's just for nothing, though. It's such a nothing thing of like, this fight scene.
Well, plot-wise, maybe,
matter.
but it, like, I don't know. I think it kills the character, and it makes you kind of feel like shit as like an audience, right? And that's like
Asuka goes from having like tried to commit suicide in a bathtub to waking up like inside a thing she presumably now hates, to having all of her problems solved by realizing that her mum's soul was bonded to a robot suit, so she goes on a murder spree.
Yeah, I think it's more that like her her relationship with her mother was that her last opinion of her was like, my mother tried to kill me and my mother abandoned me. So the realization that her mother is in fact doing the exact opposite of all those things, like I
don't
buy
see
the
where
significance
that
of it,
realization comes from at all, though. There's like, at least with Shinji at the end of last season, like at least there was like a whole episode that was kind of focused on people like vaguely talking to him about his emotions, and
It's
so
like,
it's still
yeah.
a bit out of nowhere that he's just suddenly
it's
like, I
also-
can be happy, but
it's
a bit more deserved than it feels with Asuka, where it's just like, let's just shit on this character,
But
and
also-
now she's happy. It's like, what?
How does she realise it's her mum's soul? That's a weird, like, conceptual leap to make. Again, people, like, tell Shinji that, yeah, your mum died in a weird accident right here where we were building the Ava and your mum is in it now. But, like, Asuka found her mum hanging dead somewhere. How did they get the soul into the Unit 2?
Because she kind of, I think it's implied that she kind of lost her. I mean, I know all the weird lore. I think it's implied that she kind of lost her soul in an experiment, and that's why she didn't recognize Asuka anymore. I'm just going to talk to the dog. I think
See,
what
that's
it was.
cool! Why isn't that in the show?
Because it's implied, you know. It's subtle.
This feels like some J.K. Rowling I intended it all along bullshit.
I think the scene where she is like in the Ava and in her mind she goes and sees her mum is enough for it to be like, oh, my mum's here, you know. I think that's
Not like I'm having weird stress hallucinations because I might be about to die and I was just in hospital moments ago.
I think it's fairly clear, and I think the fact that she becomes so uplifted by it adds to the weight of her realizing it. You know, it's like, okay, she's now back on her game, you know, which is good.
What I would say is that I think about this, I am maybe a little bit more on Jonathan and Andrew's side, where if I was Asuka in that moment, I don't know if I would have quite made that internal leap, but I'm not the character. And for me, it doesn't matter whether it's subtly implied or there's just no evidence for it at all. It's what the story then does with that, and it completely motivates her to get out of her dump and try and basically reclaim something back. To fight the people who are attacking the headquarters, and what it leads on to is something that's so powerful that I don't really care if it's a strange thing for the soul of someone to be trapped inside a giant mech suit. I'll go along with it. I don't care, because Neon Genesis Evangelion is hardly something that I think you watch for
The writing?
not the writing, not the writing, for a plot that's so completely
Like neat.
I guess neat, but more just I guess easily realized. I don't know how better to put it, but something where it's like, okay, no, yeah, okay, this makes sense because of this, because of this, because of this. I mean, it does have these angels that attack, and they're trying to fuse with this ancestral being in the basement of a giant pyramid, and it's like when you say these things out loud, it's like, well, I don't know if you watch the show to pick apart plot holes like this. It's kind of what you do with them that matters, and if you don't think that there is much cause for Asuka to believe that, or for the show to even try and suggest something like that in the first place, that the soul of her mother might be in this suit, is completely fair, and I'm kind of more on your side about that. But it's what they do with it, how that motivates the plot to move forward, that makes me go, well, I just simply don't really care.
The problem I more have is that it's not so much the kind of jump in, oh, my mum's soul is in this. It's more just, it feels like such an emotional 180 for that character that I think it is one of those like reoccurring problems I have with this show, is just that
It's a Martha thing. It's basically a Martha. It's like, Martha?
Yeah.
And
It goes into all this trauma, and then just sort of just immediately it almost feels solved. That is just, yeah. So for all the like wave off the bad sort of plot elements or however it was sort of foreshadowed or not, it is still as a following the character and their journey. It just is such a whiplash moment. Though I will give I although I personally find like the mechanics of that fight quite dull, at least the emotion that Asuka is bringing to that fight is quite nice, and it is pleasing to have at least some moment where she is sort of more herself, because she's been having such a rough time sort of in the episodes leading up to the film at the end. So there is some emotional sort of stuff I do get from it there. Not on a level where it's like it took over my body or anything like that. But I don't know. I think that's part of why it sort of annoys me that the lead into it is so weak in my mind, because it's like you had a strong thing you could do there, and it's just sort of lessened by everything that leads up to it.
Yeah, it's more just it feels like Asuka gets a like get out of jail free card for all her emotional turmoil, and that's not as interesting to me as actually having to work through it. It does what it needs to do. It gets her into the mood for fighting, so she'll have a cool fight scene, but it's not instant character development is not necessarily good character development. Like, Shinji got a whole 20-minute episode of getting over hating himself. Asuka gets, my mum is in this suit! And that's it. And that's my issue, I think.
I don't think she's like completely solved. I just think that it like puts her in a state of mind to where she can act better. But to be fair, I think as big as it is a part of the first half of the film, I think there are some other key scenes, especially involving Asuka, that we should take the time to cover. So the film starts with Shinji being in his depressed little whiny state, and he goes to Asuka for help, who is hospitalized, and he does the obvious thing that you would do if you were in that situation. Perhaps one of the most believable character moments in the show.
Look, come on, we've all been teenage boys, we've all been to hospitals. Let's not make any sweeping judgment statements about this. Let's just treat it with the sensitivity and respect it deserves.
Yeah. It feels so famous. I don't know if I have to literally describe it, but he does jack off to Asuka, who is comatose. So there's obviously the immediate guttural reaction of, well, that's fucked up, which is what he says. But I'm interested.
Well, depending
to hear...
on which version you watch, you either get the correct translation of "I'm the lowest of the low," or the superior original translation of "I'm so fucked up," which they should have kept, because it's just the uncut gems.
I think both are great ones. But yeah, I'm so fucked up. There's a lot of weight to that. But what were your all immediate response? God, I can't believe this is the first scene of the film.
That was my response. This is the first scene of the film. But at the same time, right? I actually I didn't expect this. I didn't go into the film saying, okay, no, this is definitely going to happen. But I knew that there was...
It would have been a weird prediction.
Exactly. I didn't know what was going to happen, but I knew that the first scene was going to... I knew it was going to be controversial, and I knew that it was going to be quite a shocking way to start the film, just because Harry had mentioned something, or Tony had mentioned something, or they talked about something before I'd watched the film saying, oh yeah. No, actually, I think I know what it was. It was like, Jonathan's going to hate this film because of the first scene in the film, and that, made me want to go, oh, what is this? What happens in this first scene? So I knew it was going to start off with quite a bang.
That's worst choice of words.
Really, the first scene of this film is just like the 30 production companies that were involved.
That's true.
I didn't get to see that. I didn't get to see that because me and Harry, when we watched it, we set up a Netflix party, And when I joined the party, he'd already skipped like a minute and a half, 2 minutes in, and I said, "Well, hang on, where's the first minute and a half of the film?" And he said, "Oh, it's just Japanese logos," and I just couldn't believe that there were that many.
That's honestly a fifth of the good things I have to say about this film is those long company logos.
I mean, I don't know what you guys are talking about, because the first scene of the film is Shinji looking out into the water. You're talking about the second scene. Be a pedant. No. So the first time I watched it, I was just like, you come off episode 25 and 26, which is someone who kind of who kind of made a piece of art about finding self-love, which I watched at a time in my life where I didn't have much, and I was like, that's really uplifting. Shinji, I like this guy. Would I call him a friend? Maybe. And then you watch this film, and you're like, Shinji, what are you doing?
He took the self-love bit a bit too far.
He's the guy from the memes, He's the guy from my Discord profile. Why are you doing this, Shinji? I think it kind of the film wouldn't work without it, because it's a way of immediately turning the audience against Shinji. The character often kind of has a lot of self-hatred and calls himself like a sneak and a coward, and he really hates himself. And in the show, you're like, you're kind of carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. Why do you hate yourself so much? So yeah, like now I understand why you hate yourself so much, and I kind of hate you a little bit too, or more than a little bit. So I think it works from that. It also, I mentioned this in the previous podcast, but I think End of Evangelion, this is both a criticism of it and I think a positive. I think it's made with a clear kind of point of view and message of like, people didn't like the original ending, people didn't get it. I am now making a film about the anime industry, about the kind of the otaku obsessive kind of culture. And in doing this, I'm going to almost betray the Shinji of the show to make him the audience surrogate, to make him the kind of target I'm attacking. So literally starting the show with Shinji kind of being a pervert and objectifying and assaulting a female character is a pretty direct way of starting a film about that. Of being like, yeah, this is the obsessive otaku to the kind of the girls in this anime, and it starts the film's key theme, which for me is misogyny. I think the show talks about Shinji's misogyny, but this film is directly kind of confronting it. It's probably the one thing, along with like the apocalypse, I'd say the film is about. It's about a boy that ends the world because he hates women so much.
Yeah, to quickly expand on what Harry said of how this film is about like taking a certain point of view and almost attacking it, is the two main things that happen in the first arc, is Shinji's scene in the hospital and Asuka's fight scene, and they're both almost like weird like monkeys' poor wishes of like how people like complained about the last two episodes of the show, and they were like, look, we just want cute girls and big robot fights, and Hideaki Anno was like, took that wish and was like, fuck you, is this what you want? And showed the hospital scene, was like, this is you sick fuck, treat it like, almost that's the statement.
Why did you make me draw this?
How dare you get horny at my horny anime with 14-year-old girls in?
I think that's the point though, is that he created them as Asuka as like a fully realized character, and almost hated the idea that they were treated as just like sex objects, to sell cool looking figures of them in plug suits. Which I guess you could make the argument that he is like partially responsible for it, but I also think no matter how you create an anime character, this response will happen. So he's righteously mad.
Someone designed the suit that becomes skin tight when you press a button on it, and had one shot in the entire show, as far as I'm aware, of Shinji getting into it, and then several other shots of the female characters getting into them and using the skin tightification button. I was thinking earlier about a distinction for anime, and I believe that Neon Genesis Evangelion is a horny anime. It's not a sexy anime, it is a horny anime. And I believe any attempt to say that it's not a horny anime is
I don't know.
disingenuous.
I think if you were making something horny, you wouldn't intentionally show it as bad. Like Shinji's view on Asuka in the hospital scene is not like one where we're meant to rally behind him and be like, "Way," you know. It's looking at it and saying like, "Isn't this horrible?" Which I think is pretty clear.
I think there's a certain amount of the male gaze that kind of comes through in the show. So you could say like, yeah, at points the show is misogynistic, without meaning to be, and I think that's true. But I think in this film in particular, this film is not horny, as in it's not trying to kind of titillate, it's not trying to turn you on. There's a lot of nudity, but it's never meant to be sexually arousing nudity. I think it's always a representation of the theme.
If it were a sexy anime, it would be trying to titillate you, but it is instead a horny anime, which is a lesser thing.
Yeah, I think this film, it does have a lot of that. And I understand, like, feeling uncomfortable and being like, I like this less. And there's nothing against you if you like it less, because it's like, oh, I don't like this stuff being in there, which is probably the attitude I would have taken a few years ago. But I think this film's one of the big things that changed it, where I'm like, this is like almost a complete takedown of the kind of stuff that Tony would make me watch that I'd hate, you know?
Why then is Rey perpetually naked in this film?
I think the problem that I have is it's because those sort of male gaze moments kind of throughout the TV series and sort of other little bits sort of meant I lost faith in the creators of this show to be having that sort of nuance. So it meant when like seeing these scenes, I was never sort of thinking it from I don't know, I wasn't thinking of it. I didn't have the trust in them to think that they were dealing with that in a good way, and so I just couldn't really respond in a sort of, oh, what a great artistic creation. It was just like, why, dudes? This is unnecessary.
I do feel it's a bad sign as well when the creator needs to mention, like, right at the start that they'd like to thank the 5 women that helped them make this. And it's like, I know women, I'm beyond criticism here. I know at least 5 women who I am grateful for helping me with this.
Yeah, the way that the female characters are treated in, especially this film, it does feel like a sort of, well, the way you're sort of describing to me, at least.
I don't know. I think it's a feminist film. I mean, Rey's entire arc, right, is she was kind of created and pretty much had her entire identity was defined by things that Gendo wanted from her. So she was made from the body of his dead wife. And the soul of essentially the mother of humanity, and that's her entire existence. And we talked about her arc being incredibly sad, and her kind of lowest point is also in this film. There's a really kind of horrific scene, which has some kind of very disgusting imagery, which is very much implied to be kind of sexual assault. And following on from that, she becomes a god. And I think that it's the Tony thing of it. It may not be empowering, but it's literally someone getting more power. So I think there is again some catharsis in seeing Rey like reject Gendo finally, see him for what he is, and fucking end the world or help to end the world as a god. Also, the entire kind of sequence from Rey fusing with Lilith to pretty much the end of the film, I think is completely masterful. I'm very obsessed with the Kom Susa Todd sequence, the actual third impact happening. It's got this kind of upbeat pop song with very depressing lyrics, and then suddenly this kind of melancholy kind of piano clicks in, which is also kind of upbeat. It's very strange. It's that song along with the kind of visuals of everyone turning to Fanta. That kind of entire thing together, it gives me this kind of such strange feeling. I can't really describe it. It's one of the most depressing things I've ever seen, but it's also kind of really cool. And I have watched that scene out of kind of context of the film like countless times. I think it's a really fantastic. It's one of my favorite sequences in any film, to be honest. Really, really strange kind of set of emotions come through that one.
It's interesting because I forget what the term is, but when you sort of have music that kind of mismatches, it sort of turned it into sort of a comedy scene to me, especially as it just went on and on. It just felt like a comedic moment to me.
I will concede that I did quite like the music of the film. Like, most of it was pretty okay, as I said in my notes. And that's one of the... we've now hit 2 of my 5 good bits from Neon Genesis Evangelion.
Oh, that's not a bad number of good things to have in a thing, you know.
I mean, do you want me to count all the bad things?
Yeah, but like 95% of those bad things are Ray's boobs. Yeah.
I mean, 15 of the bad things, granted, are just Ray being gratuitously naked, I grant you. But there are other, like... I'll count them.
Yeah, I will agree with what Harry said about that scene. I think it is one of the funny points you can make about the show, is that a lot of the religious symbolism is just used because it looks cool. But this scene is one where, holy fuck, the religious symbolism looks cool, and I think the scene just has this immense sense of weight to it, like as Harry said, with this completely strange emotion you feel. That to me is this mix of awe and wonder and intense horror at what's happening. That's also incredibly fascinating.
I'm definitely on your side with that as well. I think the last half of the film, where things kind of step up a notch and it really, really becomes about the fate of all humanity, pretty much. It's just, I mean, it's gorgeous. It's absolutely stunning.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're right about the Christian imagery. It just looks cool, and it's funny because when things stop being on the scale of Earth and they go beyond that, there are some shots that make me just go, oh, this is just the most beautifully drawn things I have ever seen. It's like beauty on a cosmic scale. Some of the animation that you see, and it actually kind of reminds me of an animated 2001. At times, there's a very, very particular shot that I can think of where it almost looks like a sun is behind. The sun is behind this. It almost looks like a monolith, and it's just the way that things are structured in the frame. Remind me of 2001, and that's a really good thing for me to be reminded of 2001.
It's definitely a deliberate thing as well, because Anno is clearly inspired by Kubrick in his framing, his pacing, use of classical music, and the fact that he gets bored with the instrumentality committee and makes them fucking monoliths.
That is true. Yeah, but it's just I think it was when I looked back at this film and I was like, okay, the first half is a very, very solid action film where, there's a lot that hangs in the balance, and every character, you could argue about this indefinitely, but for me it felt like every character had kind of maybe Akagi less so, but had a crucial role to play. Everyone was out doing their own things, they're kind of separated, but it's all part of the greater plan. And then the second half of the film is just, oh my god, it's so stunning. In fact, I can't even really... I think if you came up with the plot synopsis for the second half of the film, it would be 2 or 3 lines. There wouldn't be much more to it. It's just...
Ray gets big and moody. People are soup.
It would just be the awe and wonder that you see of watching this process of instrumentality taking place on a truly cosmic scale, and I loved every second of it. Every second of it.
There are some striking visuals in there. My favourite visual is probably when you've got half of Ray's head sort of severed on a red background or sort of planet. I think it's one
right
of those
at the end when
iconic shots.
Giant Ray is decomposing.
Yeah. Also, no tits in that moment. Actually, no 14-year-old tits. Makes it better.
Decomposing giant 14-year-old.
I mean, how old is Lilith?
Yeah.
Billions of years. I can't believe I've become the very biggest
the arc has been complete.
Actually, I think you'll find that she's actually a 727-year-old god in the body of a 14-year-old girl, and that makes it very different. Actually,
well, to be fair, I don't think. Yeah, it's not like a human at this point.
I mean, it's anatomically exactly the same as how Ray was being drawn before she became big.
She looks a bit older, to be
white.
fair.
It isn't. You're not meant to jerk off to it. Though.
Yeah,
it is dissection. It's under the skin nudity of it's kind of completely decent. It's just someone is new.
I don't know. I just don't think I'm being that weird when I'm like, there's a bit too much of a naked 14-year-old in this film for me.
But that's the thing. It's such a strange thing to say out loud. I can't believe I'm saying it out loud. But I do enjoy seeing those shots, not in a sexual way. I just think they look stunning. I mean, seeing this happen on such a massive scale, even the shots that have Ray in, to see how the animators manipulate a process happening on paper. It's phenomenal. I can't help but see the artistry in that. But what I was going to say a second ago was that I think it would be a different case entirely if it was like a live action film, and this is what I think we've been talking about a little bit outside of the podcast. Where if it was a live action film and a literal child was being exploited like this, it would be completely different. It'd be
They can't do that, obviously.
Exactly. Or I don't know what more to say other than I don't think it's such a terrible thing if it's animated.
Yeah, I think the main sort of gripes I have with the ritual sort of stuff, because I'd never really had a moment where I particularly looked at what was going on in the ritual and was like, that's a cool visual, just because I think it was sort of too, I don't know, just sort of too much really, that was like, I do not care.
Just seemed kind of generic. Like, I can't remember anything terribly iconic from it other than maybe the bit where Rei and the person I will only ever identify as Shinji's gay boyfriend are like merged together at the hips and are like doing a weird leaning thing. That was
that's
kind of cool, moment. I guess. But
the problem is because a lot of it is just these 7 things line up, and then we just have a lot of like
Latin in the sky, floating Latin and circles in the sky.
And it's like
and then the my favorite Yu-Gi-Oh card, the Swords of Revealing Light, appear and cover the whole world. Keeping it trapped in face-up defense position for 3 turns.
Yeah, but I mean, ignoring even just like the visual element of it, I think the problem I think I really have with it is because you have sort of no idea what's going on, which sort of means when anything's like, when Ray sort of is like, nah, fuck being groped, I'm going to go up and do my own thing. So like, I have no idea what this means.
Is
when
this good?
Shinji reacts in a certain way,
is this
you're like,
bad?
I don't know what that.
Who wants this?
Yeah, it just means you have this.
Is she helping Shinji? Does Shinji want this?
Yeah,
I think Shinji pretty clearly doesn't want anything to happen in this film. He is just dragged along.
Yeah, you just have an extended 20 minutes of like, I don't know how to react to any of this. Is this good? Is this bad? What does this mean? You have spent 24 episodes, 26 episodes.
There is a key line there that you're missing. Maybe like one of the most important. Like, obviously it starts as like a ritual, and you can just you're not dumb. You go, okay, this is a ritual. But when it becomes the Tree of Life, a character literally goes like, he has everything. A character sits down and tells you, the audience. He looks straight into the camera. It is worse in the dub, to be fair, because I watched both. But he goes like, look, Shinji now has the power to end all life. Is it going to be good or is it going to be bad? It's all on him now. He like tells you, he's like, pay attention because it's all on him. And then it shows you inside his headspace, shows you his fucking misogynistic worldview. Shows him snapping, strangling Asuka, and then at that moment, the song starts, the world ends, and all the characters are like, oh my god, the world is ending. And while Seela are like smiling, like, yes. So I feel like it does a pretty good job of like, it starts confusing for sure, because like, they're just doing nonsense that looks cool. But after that, they're like, look, this is it's up to Shinji now, this is what's going to happen. And then it's up to him,
But they've had like 24 episodes to get to this point to give you some idea what's actually going on, and like one of my many criticisms of this is that like having had absolutely no clue what the Human Instrumentality Project was for the entire of the series, Katsuragi explains what it is in one sentence early on at the start of the film. And this is not a criticism of the film, really. It's more a criticism of the series, but they're basically the same thing. It's just, was that so difficult? Was that one sentence so difficult for you that you couldn't find a way to fit it in to any of the TV series up to this point, so I would know why any of this was happening?
Like, I know it's like an alternative ending in terms of like realities or whatever, maybe it's simultaneous, but I don't think anyone would ever watch this ending without having seen 25 and 26. So like, I think it starts the film with the knowledge that you pretty much know what's happened, at least to some extent, and we're just going to kind of contextualize it in the real world. It's a tight 80 as well. Like,
I was
there's no,
shocked how
like
short it
you were
was.
complaining about the Attica thing, but like there ain't no time. We're fucking doing this. Where every character's getting a moment that they didn't get at the end of the show. We haven't talked about any of them, but I think pretty much every character apart from Shinji gets a better conclusion to their arc in this film. And yeah, that stuff is good in my opinion.
I mean, that's partly because they just kind of skipped having any ending for the other characters and were just like, yeah, for the final episode of the TV series, we're just going to focus exclusively on Shinji, because why the hell not?
Yeah, they were like,
Let's
we haven't
cure
got
this
time.
kid of
They were
his
very
depression.
cut for time, to be fair. But
It says at the start, we don't have time.
I mean, it's kind of a blessing, because they probably would have just done like another 8 episodes that were just one episode on each of any of the characters slowly working through all their weird quirks.
I would have loved that.
But yeah, I do agree. Before we skip too far forward, I think Misato and Akagi's ending, like there is a lot of tragedy in how they both, come to their ends. Like Misato's one is pretty much her giving her like final like attempt to like to break Shinji out of his shell, and like failing to do it basically, and then just sort of forcing him in the final moment and tricking him, which is just just saying like, hey, if you come back, wink wink nudge nudge, which is obviously her using like her like holding this power of authority like over him, and like using that to like try and convince Shinji to go along to get in the robot, which is is quite sad that it's come to that, that Shinji is like, you can put a lot of the blame on him, for being whiny and for being misogynist, but I do think that there is like, his circumstances aren't great, like a lot of the show has been about his dilemma about whether or not he gets in the robot, and the fact that at the final moment with Misato, it's just her just breaking down and just tricking him at the final moment, being just fully manipulating him and then dying, which is quite tragic. Yeah, and her final words being Kaji, did I do it right? And then getting hit by a bomb. It's very sad. It's very sad.
I don't need to go on about it. We're all aware it's bad for someone that is a parental figure of a 14-year-old.
And I think the film is also aware that it's bad. It's not doing it on accident.
I don't know. I feel like the sort of person
This is Funky Boy all over again. I'm gonna jump out the window.
The only way to get this 14-year-old to do what I want is to hint that I might have sex with him. That, I don't know, because you see, my trouble is when I started watching Neon Genesis Evangelion all those years ago, I was like, I wasn't that into it, and then I was like, well, it's got, for an anime, it's got some actually quite good, well-rounded female characters. They're interesting. They have like actual personalities. That's good. It's good. She's even got a pet penguin, and that's never addressed, and that's awesome. I love that, and that penguin kept me watching. I hate that penguin now, but I don't hate the penguin. I could never hate Pen. But yeah, it's like Katsuragi's great, and then it's like, did you know she's just got real bad dad issues, and everything about her is her dad issues, and it's like, oh, well, that's bad. You had a nice, complicated character, and then you're like, and it's all because of her dad, and her boyfriend is her dad, and she wants to fuck her dad. And it's like, no, why? You were doing so good. You were doing so good. And now it's like, and now I'm going to snog this 14-year-old. And it's like, Why? You had a good character. You had a good, interesting character, and you were like, I'm going to throw her under a bus. A 14-year-old bus that she's going to kiss a lot.
As well, the sort of scene where it's just like, right, everyone come into her bedroom and we're just going to be like, oh,
You're
you
dirty.
sexual
You're
deviant.
gross, you deviant, having consensual sex with a man you love. Look at you.
I think a part of making a well-rounded character is being willing to give them flaws, and the fact that she has a complicated relationship with, you know, how she feels about her dad is like, it doesn't feel like contrived that it's trying to make everything about men, you know, just because of a skewed, you know, sort of worldview, you know.
I think his obsession. I definitely agree with the characterization that by being obsessed with Freud, Anno falls into tropes for sure. That are kind of like just disproved kind of sexist theories. I think with both of the kind of 20 kind of 8-9-year-old female employees in Nerve kind of fall into this problem. But I don't know. I think Misato is my favorite character in the show, and this has always been a part of her character. I think pretty early on you find out about like each character is kind of built by their trauma, and her trauma is related to her relationship with her father. And I think every character in this show is, to be honest, it's all about the parents. I think the elevator scene, the other elevator scene from this film, I think it really works because she knows that if she kind of like pretends to be interested in Shinji will back away and get into the elevator. And she realizes in her final moments the only way to motivate this kid is to have him reject me, which is really fucking sad. Yeah, I mean, I feel like you guys are characterizing it like it's like a power fantasy, or like it's like, I don't know, like a moral failing of the character, and not just like, I mean, it is something deeply fucked up. But it's not meant to be like, oh, this is so hot, you know, like Shinji's so lucky. It's like, oh no, this is this person who's dedicated their life to this cause that they are now rallying against in their final moments, realizing that they're gonna have to give their life to this fucking kid who's such a piece of shit in this film anyway. And it's really fucking sad, that moment.
I feel like resorting to, oh no, one of my characters is going to have to deliberately fail to seduce this 14-year-old is a bad writing decision. Like, come up with another solution.
I don't think you have to. Just because it's uncomfortable and gross doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, you know? Like, fair enough if it's, like, something that makes you bounce off it personally. But I don't think, like, just the idea of having it is, like, wrong. You know, it's a thing that
I think it's
makes sense to
seems
happen
be
in the context of the show.
a switch that happened sort of, it felt like in like episodes 25 and 26, where it's just like, oh yeah, Misato is like a sexual deviant who like feels dirty and stuff like that. That it just sort of,
I mean, that's always been there though. Like, there's episode 15. She talks about her father constantly, almost to the point of parody in that episode. I think that's the one where it really starts. And I don't know, I think it's always been that. Like, I think she's my favorite character because she is so flawed. She is so bipolar. The way she kind of, she'll switch from trying to be this kind of caring mother figure to this kind of authoritative boss. And that kind of switch that she does, I think is so fascinating. And the show itself, like outside of the context of the film, definitely delves into her kind of her problems and her twisted kind of view of sexuality. And it's the only thing she has to kind of motivate Shinji in that moment. It's fucking horrible. I mean, I feel like I've said everything I can say about the scene. I think it's good. I don't think it's meant to make you feel comfortable. And if you're like personally like, oh, I was too grossed out to enjoy it, that's fair enough. But you know, the film isn't a power fantasy. You know, it isn't a feel good film. It's fucking sad. It's watching these people be decimated essentially. And same with Ritsuko, who I've said, her arc in the show, I think, is maybe the most sexist writing. I'm not a big fan of it, but I think the version of it in this film, even though it is more of the same from episode 23, I think just works better for me. I can't really explain why either. It's the same kind of her relationship with her mother. I think it's because of the kind of the tension of like having the gun and priming it. I think it just works. But anyway, that's just a ramble about how I feel about that Misato scene, and also trying to tie in the Ritsuko scene because we should probably talk about that as well because they happen cross-cutting between the scenes. Like it's Asuka fight Misato, Asuka fight Ritsuko. And also episode 25, you kind of see their bodies, which I think is interesting. So it was obviously the plan to have these two characters die in pretty much the way that they did in the show at some point.
I think we should probably cut to Ritsuko's final scene. I do quite like it that it is almost her final confrontation with Gendo, and her having rigged the supercomputers to do something on some final, like, presumably self-destruct or do something like to that effect, and her having, the Magi, which are like split into three personalities, have the one of them that represents, the woman side of her mother, the part of her that was, devoted to Gendo, reject her daughter and decide against whatever mysterious button press she had, is interesting. And there's a great moment that did happen by accident in the recording, where Gendo's final words to where the doctors were cut off, and in the dub, I think you can tell that they're trying to replicate it, whereas in the sub it did just happen by accident, where whatever he says is silent, and just the final line of her just saying, liar, before she's shot.
I had to go back and rewatch that because I thought she said lion. I was like, wait, what?
Yeah,
that's quite a different end.
I assumed he was telling her that he was her father, because that seemed like the logical thing for this film to do, given how it had treated everything else.
But yeah, just the idea that it is some, I don't know, I see it's like some final words of praise or admiration, and Ritsuko realizing that it is kind of a sham, and that she, I don't know, shouldn't have been following in her mother's footsteps right before the end. It's quite sad. Again, that's the theme. Characters are just sort of ground down into meal in this, or literally turned into soup.
Or, just dying for nothing.
Yes, it's a shame. It's a shame. But we should get to like the end of the end of Evangelion. The final everyone.
Are you talking about the final scene or the final kind of stretch? Because
The final stretch,
we haven't
I
really
guess.
Yeah, because we haven't really talked about the fact that this film just
becomes live action.
It kind of concludes my favorite scene. Yeah,
That's
it
what
concludes my
gonna-
favorite scene by like having a human eye open and then present a reflection to the audience of like an empty Japanese cinema. You kind of got to go back in time for the people that were originally watching this, who are like Ava fans. Like at the premiere, suddenly it's just this empty reflection and this monologue about don't be obsessed with anime. Ethan, do you want to talk about it?
Actually, first off, I really wanted to hear what Andrew and Jonathan had to say about this part in the film, because it could come across as extremely pretentious, and I think that might be on the side that they land on, but I'd like to hear them elaborate on it a little bit first.
Would you like to hear my exact note
Please.
from when I was taking notes watching
I really,
this
really
film?
do want to hear what you have to say.
It was just live-action film footage, full stop. Pretentious, full stop.
Right.
So yeah, congratulations, you called it. You called it exactly. I thought it was just pretentious.
God, all that DDR training is paying off.
It's like, what it made me think of, I mean, I guess it seems from listening to you guys discuss it seems like this was intentional, but it feels like, in the final series of Sherlock, when the show was clearly holding its fans in contempt, I don't know, it felt like that. It was like, ha, look at you people that like the thing I've made. You're such idiots for liking the thing I made. God, how dare you put time and effort into trying to understand this thing I made for people to watch. And that's a shitty thing for a creator to do, even if your fans are gross weirdos.
Yeah, I don't think it was.
I'm
Like...
pro creator hating the audience. Tony's gonna be like, no. I'm like, yes, and he's right to hate the audience because we do fucking stuff. Another great creator, David Lynch. I've brought him up a few times in these Evangelion podcasts. Did exactly the same thing with Twin Peaks: The Return. He's like, you want to see Dale Cooper return? Well, you're gonna have to watch 16 hours of this fucking weirdo before you get your beloved character. I don't know. I'm personally a fan of like creators that have no time for their audience and just kind of make whatever art they want to. I understand that like that is a point in your favor in terms of this, but I just think it's funny when the creator doesn't like the audience.
But I feel like David Lynch just has a vision, whereas
I think Arno does though. I think I'd call him like an auteur. I think he has a very singular kind of creative vision as well. It's probably the only anime I've watched, maybe Cowboy Bebop as well, where I'm like, okay, this is the work of like a singular artist for sure. Hi, this is Harry editing this, and I realised what I just said is one of the stupidest things ever. When I was talking about anime, I forgot the films existed. So of course, Hayao Miyazaki is one of the greatest living filmmakers. Takahata as well. Satoshi Kon. So yeah, anime obviously has other auteurs apart from Anno and Watanabe. And of course, I didn't even mention the fact that auteur theory is kind of bullshit, and it takes hundreds of people to bring a work like this to life. And also it ties into kind of the main theme of like, if this is about misogyny, if it's about anime. Another small detail is that like at one point it shows like this is the truth of the third impact, and it's like about anime influencing people, which is like a weird thing to put in. I think it kind of ties into that theme of like this idea of like what are dreams, what is reality. This kind of retreat into fantasy is what's led to the situation, and maybe don't, or showing pictures of the Evangelion audience dressing up and holding the characters. You know, I don't know. I think it worked. I didn't know about it before I went in, so I can't be like, oh, it really surprised me. It was one of the things that made me really want to watch the show, actually, finding out that the film suddenly has like a live action segment. But yeah, I really like the message behind it. I love how like random it is. I love that like starkness of just the empty auditorium, and the footage they used as well. I thought was really powerful.
I think it's not so much as it hates the entire audience. I think like the context in which End of Evangelion was made is like a response to the sort of hatred against the final two episodes of the show.
I mean, he received death threats, didn't he? The creator,
Yeah.
and he put those into the live action sequence of the film, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's kind of like criticism. It's like positive and negative responses like flash up pretty quickly. Obviously, we can't read them, but from that's what people say. It's like half death threats, half like this changed my life. Kind of appears.
And I think like a lot of like one of the through line of you know Shinji like trying to deal with himself is wondering or not if he should run away from his current situation, and the fact that is then mirrors onto how the audience can almost like try and run away from their own life into their own fantasy and dreams, which is, you know, represented by the show itself. I think is what is being critiqued. It's not like a blanket hatred. It's like kind of like an understanding of obsession with the show, and all like the bad sides of that. The what Arno like is trying to point out, and you know, trying to say like, hey, you should not jack off to this. You should not want these characters to experience more violence in cool action fight scenes because it's bad for them. And you should, you know, accept you know the core message that was put out very nicely in the last two episodes comparatively of how you actually have to try and, you know, find your place in this world and communicate with people instead.
I was waiting for that sound.
Sorry, I feel like I've made that sound a lot. I mean that's not a bad point, and you put that very well. I don't know. I guess I'm just quite cynical, and whenever anyone puts like live action stuff in a animated thing and is like, actually, we're, you know, what about you? Ooh, we're breaking the fourth wall here. It just always reads to me kind of like lazy, sort of a shorthand for a deeper meaning that I am not convinced is there.
That's fair enough. That is fair enough. But I think for me, it's the fact that I just don't see that. I don't until I'd watched End of Evangelion, I I don't think I'd ever watched. Maybe I haven't. I'm just forgetting something really, really obvious. But I can't think of anything animated that I've ever watched that has that goes to and makes that reach. Um, and it left me feeling the same way that I did. It reminds me of the 26th episode, actually, that moment, because it felt like something that was. It felt like just a new way to communicate a message. I'm a really big fan of watching things and experiencing things that, as Tony says, highlight a message or try and communicate something in a very unorthodox way. And to, have watched 26 episodes and a full film that's completely animated, and then at one point for them to just put up this very, very, 100% grainy filter. Looks like a camcorder filmed the footage in that sequence. It caught me off guard in the same way that the sequence in episode 26 when Shinji's reduced to just a sketch on a piece of paper catches me off guard. It just you can talk about how if something might have weight, but if it's not saying anything, then then what was the point of it in the first place? But to me, just having weight is enough to captivate me and keep me watching. And it was just another thing to add to the list of ways that Neon Genesis Evangelion had basically taken expectations that I had about anime and about the shows that we had watched on this podcast previously, and just completely turned them on their head and show me something new, something that I did not expect, something that I could not anticipate. So it's just a greater extent to how I felt about watching this entire show, basically.
But yeah, I think the biggest theme that I've personally drawn through the show and this film is it's about relationships between people. I think it's a lot about again, started off very early in the show, the hedgehog dilemma. It's just sort of about how people interact and how people are fundamentally lonely, but also like how in trying to get closer to each other, people end up doing just more harm than good, which is why there's a lot of tragic endings to characters in this film. But I also think that it does, through a very tilted lens, you could see it being about hope, being about how despite the fact that people's relationships, they often end up causing each other more harm than good, and about how it's just you're gonna spend your entire life trying to understand yourself and other people, and you're still just gonna be miserable. There is that one moment, I think Caro says it, where he represents the hope that one day people will come to understand each other, and I think that's like the one hopeful thing that you can grab onto that End of Eva represents, that is highlighted even more with the stark contrast of everyone else coming to such tragic ends, and how essentially violent Shinji becomes towards everyone. He literally tries to kill Asuka, but I think through the fact that he recognizes that, skip to the end here, he recognizes that Asuka, he recognizes something that makes him not kill her and be willing to attempt to communicate and to build a relationship, which is the very faint hope out of a very dark movie.
Yeah, we haven't actually talked about the fact that he does end the world, but he brings it back. There is kind of a 5 minutes of positivity, or it is pretty similar to 25-26 in this way that 25 and this first bit of this film is the kind of dark instrumentality happening, everyone's dead, this is your fault revelation, although it makes more sense in the film. And then the rejection, the kind of, no, I mean, this isn't what I want. And there isn't as much detail as the show. I think maybe they didn't want to cover the same ground. But yeah, there is kind of a sequence of hope. Humanity, despite the fact that the Earth looked fucking barren in the final scene, that final scene is very vague and can be interpreted a lot of ways. They say people will come back. People have a will to live, have a will to survive, and they'll have to find themselves, quite literally, but they will. So there is that kind of hope in there. But like as an ending in total, for me, this is like a dark mirror of the original ending, where in the original, just a few different circumstances can like fundamentally change Shinji. Like he does end the world in both endings, I think, in my interpretation. But and he does bring people back, but he learns to love himself in the original ending. You have that very overly sentimental, optimistic ending where everyone applauds him. And then you have this version where, upon waking up on the beach, the kind of key symbol of hands, there's that really great shot of them laying next to each other with their two hands so close, but they're just not quite touching each other. You know, they're not quite connected again. And it's kind of a really good way visually of showing that separation is back. And then he tries to choke Asuka in that final scene as well. And yeah, he does stop, but it's that kind of immediate return to the first thing he can kind of remember doing, which is choking her in that kind of misogynistic fever dream he has before he ends the world. So there is hope and there is despair. You know, it is what Evangelion's all about. And this, for me, anyways, is the kind of the dark mirror Shinji, where just a few different circumstances have kind of led to all this.
I think that's definitely true. But to me, I think the moment that I finished watching the film, I think it was the perspective that I went into the End of Evangelion knowing it was going to be the bleakest outlook of all time. So I really wanted to try and dig something, any kind of happiness out of it. So for me, I think I have maybe the most bittersweet opinion about the ending, and the only thing that suggests to me anything like that is, well, okay, so it's two things. First off, it is that line about people having the capacity and the will to come back if they desire. The human instrumentality isn't this seemingly finite melding of all of humanity. That if you have a will, you can come back. But it's the final line of the film. It's her, and it was just that final line, and it was like, when Asuka says that, what I expected to hear afterwards is like the da 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 da. I expected that really pleasant, cheerful theme that always plays in their apartment. It's that one final line, and I know disgusting by itself is such a negative word, but I mean, it's such a typical thing for Asuka to say, because in that final scene, what I was actually, and I can't believe I'm saying this out loud, because my opinion of Asuka was so tainted at the start because of how annoying I found her. But as you discover more and more about her, she becomes a lot more sympathetic. What I really wanted more than anything was I just didn't give a shit about humanity. I wanted Asuka to be okay. That was my number one priority at that point. And to see her eyes just move up to look at Shinji, and the camera pans out and she says "disgusting" in such a typical classic Asuka way of pointing out the way that that Shinji is, kind of, it left me feeling better inside than I expected. It kind of made me think, well, you know what, maybe things might be okay. I know that's one interpretation. I'm not saying that
I see it just as like the beginning of hell for her, basically, because it I mean, I've not seen it, but it feels like Passengers to me, where it's just like almost like stranded with like this person that almost feels to be dragging you along for his own personal like gratification.
I think Asuka probably came back for the same reasons that Shinji did, right? I think that's.
I mean, it's super unclear why any of them come back.
Yeah, I'm gonna say I read it, since Shinji seems to have the power to like save humanity or not. It seems that it should also be within his power to like, when he sort of makes his way through, also like bring Asuka or something. I don't know.
It does also look like maybe Rei just dropped Asuka off there as kind of a joke for Shinji, just a goodbye present before I fuck off across the galaxy or whatever I do now.
Maybe. I think it might possibly be because you kind of, I think you expect Asuka to like start attacking him maybe, after he's just pretty much tried to suffocate her and then changed his mind.
Oh.
I mean, it looks like she has no energy. Like, she's barely opening her eyes because she's been being suffocated
She only has one of them as well.
Her immediate, her last couple of hours have been, or her last couple of days were attempting to kill herself in a deserted, ruined house in a bathtub, being taken to hospital, waking up inside an Ava, having a moment of happiness when she realised her mum loved her, doing some fighting, getting really hurt, and then she wakes up on a beach with Shinji strangling her, and then I think at that point she doesn't care if she lives or dies. She's like,
it's pretty disgusting.
I'm not even going to struggle, just kill me. And then he stops and she's like, for fuck's sake, Shinji, for fuck's sake, you can't even kill me right. And she's just like, I don't have the energy to say anything.
No, I actually think I agree
just
with
have to
this
say, disgusting. Fuck you, Shinji. I could have died, but no, you're here. You're going to be whining all the time. You're going to be like, it's up to us to bring humanity back, and now I'm stuck here.
The classic pickup line.
Yeah.
It's difficult to tell if it's just like the version of Asuka that's within Shinji's head that is like, oh, I know that you do this, or if it's like the soup version of the real Asuka, and she is sort of aware of that sort of side. But I don't know, I can't think of a worse thing than being stranded on a planet alone with someone that has basically sexually assaulted you.
I think people are coming back though. Like it is one of the classic misinterpretations that they are now Adam and Eve and this is their world. Where like the scene before they're like, oh yeah, everyone's going to come back if they want. I think it's just more of like a thematic.
But are they saying everyone will come back, or are they saying humanity broadly will come back because Shinji and Asuka are going to have to fuck?
If they have to find their own shapes, but they will return, and then they're like humanity as a generalized kind of collective does have this capacity to survive. So my interpretation of that is that people are going to come back.
I'm not saying you're wrong to interpret it that way. My point is more that there are just... You could interpret it as, like, these people's souls are free and they will need new bodies to inhabit, and those bodies are going to be created by Asuka and Shinji getting it on, hopefully, in a few years' time.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely valid. You'd kind of have to ignore the whole, like, finding their shape thing. Like, I guess you could interpret that as, like, inhabiting a body as is finding a shape. I always imagined that people will come back.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, yeah, it depends on how you sort of interpret that line. The sort of problem is it just, I don't know, it just all falls to like people either like making guesses or just like their interpretations of the deep sea scrolls or whatever, that it's just sort of difficult to tell, like, is that correct, what that character is saying? Should I assume they're right? Because it's like, you've got Sile who are like, interpret the soupening as like this great thing that they're like, oh my god, yes, finally I am soup, and then like you've got other people that are like, maybe the soup's not so good. And the feeling I got from the end of 25 and 26 of like the series was that the soupening's actually kind of alright, because like it's just like free therapy for everyone, whereas this sort of goes more into like, oh no, everybody loses what makes them themselves.
I think criticisms I definitely agree with is in some of those kind of like plot and lore mechanics of like, so Gendo and Sela both want human instrumentality or the third impact, and so do the angels, but they all want to do it their own way. So they're all gonna like work together / fight each other for 24 episodes before at the end of the day ultimately wanting very similar things. And there are like lines where you can interpret it, where it's like Gendo wants to use Ava 1 as an arc rather than the Black Moon, because he wants to reunite with Yui. But ultimately, everyone kind of does want the same thing.
But it's because they don't communicate right.
There we go, part of the
Ties
theme.
back to the central theme.
It all loops around.
Bad miscommunication.
I think it is kind of confusing as an audience, though, because it's suddenly like, okay, so Zila, who want the third impact to happen, are telling the Japanese government that NERV are trying to do the third impact, so the Japanese government will attack NERV, so then they can get the Adam and soul of Lilith or whatever, so then they can do it. It's like it's that kind of thing of you haven't told the audience well enough, so that when the characters start lying about it, you have it. It's like the Godfather 2 thing of Michael Corleone at the start of the film lying to someone, but you don't know he's lying the first time you've seen the film, so you're just confused as a viewer as to what is happening.
They send in the Japanese security forces, and then they just send in their own Avas that presumably came from, I don't know, the US or Germany or wherever they were building other Avas. And it's like, well, why did you call in the Japanese government first?
They were probably hoping that the soldiers would take over Nerve without having to deploy the Avas in the first place. But obviously, when
But they
Asuka
needed to
comes out the
deploy
lake,
the Avas to do the soupening, though, because they seem to be an integral part of the
I think they need
flying
Unit
into
1.
the sky
They say they
to
need
do-
Unit 1 for some reason. I don't know why, but they do.
It's the one that has
throughout the
the
entire
ST
show,
engine.
they're like,
Whatever that
it's
means.
really important that we have this. So I think what you need is, I think you need Unit 1. You need a soul of Adam or Lilith, and then you need either the body of Adam or Lilith. You need a various combination of
So
things.
I want to just say something. I will admit that it's convoluted, definitely, and it's hard to come to some very, very concrete understanding of how instrumentality properly works, what it is that you need, and all of that. But I think that if I didn't know myself, I would have probably not enjoyed the film as much. However, I had Harry, and he paused at certain points to explain to me what was going on, and that massively helped. I can promise you. Like there was the one scene in episode 24 where Kaoru's talking to the members of Zila, and it's just a massive exposition dump. But Harry paused it and just said, "Okay, so there's this thing called the White Moon and the Black Moon," and then he basically went on to explain to me what was going on, and I had it in this film here. And so originally I was like, wait, hang on, Zila and Nerve want the same thing. Aren't they kind of allies? Why are they attacking each other? But then Harry paused and explained to me in a way that,
You need the Tenet line, don't you?
yeah, you need the 3D art, yeah.
Don't try to understand it, feel it, and then watch this graph at the end. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
if you looked at the plot points and were like, logically, is this the best way to tell this story? Fuck no. Of course it's not. It's so convoluted. It's messy. But I don't know. I feel like for me, and I understand this is 100% not the case for the Knowles brothers, it hits on this it hits this like fundamental truth. It just kind of hits me on a place I cannot describe, where I'm like, it works. I don't know. It makes me feel things. It makes me think about like things in quite like a deep level. It makes me more pretentious as a person. Like suddenly, I'm not talking about like, oh, I liked it when you punched this. I'm like, but that symbolizes the trauma, the death drive in all humans, and the separation of them. Like it makes you like a pretentious person. But I do kind of like that.
I have a theory as to what the TV series and also to an extent the film is actually about, and it is that the Neon Genesis Evangelion is a gay conversion therapy nightmare, and this is why. It seems blatantly obvious to me. I don't know if it seems this way to you, but Shinji is gay.
That's true.
He's at least bi.
Shinji, yeah, he does not seem to like women. He seems to really like his gay boyfriend. Again, name I can't remember, but the whatever number of angel it is. And he seems to like him, like a lot. They are clearly in love. And then in the manner of all gay characters in anything ever, he is immediately killed because Shinji is not allowed to have happiness or a gay boyfriend. This theory, it's not 100% perfect. It explains the religious iconography. Shinji is trapped, like metaphorically, in a very strictly religious family. He has an overbearing dad. He is forced repeatedly back into his robotic mother closet to be, closeted with his, feelings of, like, his sort of motherness, I guess. He is constantly being belittled by women for not being sufficiently manly, notably by Asuka. The wanking Shinji at the beginning of the film, that is not the behaviour of a heterosexual person. That is the behaviour of someone trying really hard to convince everyone that they are heterosexual. It's, I'm not gay. I masturbated over a naked girl in a hospital, and that's like that, dude. That's not what we do. Us straight people, we don't do that. That's not a thing we normally do. The fact that Shinji is forced by his dad to murder his gay boyfriend, like, You know, that's killing the gay person inside yourself to be the straight person that you definitely actually are. And the end of the film is Shinji being dumped alone in what I assume to be a forced marriage. It's a metaphor for a forced marriage with a woman he hates so much he almost strangles her to death because he's realised that is his life now, and he is going to have to spend eternity married to her because his family will not let him divorce. And that's going to be it, and he won't ever be, truly himself.
And she thinks he's disgusting as well. She's homophobic.
Yeah,
I actually like
she
this
thinks
theory a
he's
lot.
disgusting. I have more evidence, just little bits. Like in the series, there is an occasion where Shinji is out camping with one of his male friends. They are sleeping together in a tent, and a ton of armed men appear and take Shinji away. Now, you might say that's because he's an Evangelion pilot and he needs to be there to maybe save the world if it's in trouble. But I say no, that is a metaphor for him being repressed by his family, not wanting him to spend time alone with boys because they think he's gay and they don't like that. So yeah, it's actually about gay conversion therapy. I have closed my notebook. That is my thesis.
One possible reality of many which could exist is this one, which fair enough. I mean, I do think there is a pretty consistent through line about Shinji's relationship with Kaoru, and I kind of buy it. But I think there's an interesting point that Asuka brings up, where she says, like, you don't need me, Shinji, you just want anyone, which is kind of, I guess, summarizing like a lot of how he's like desperately trying to cling to other people, I think it's a shame that Kaoru is the only one he has like a real meaningful connection with that sadly doesn't culminate.
Like I don't want to. I'm clearly not totally serious about this, but I also don't want to admit that I'm not entirely serious about this. So
I just wanted to say, why does the creator of the show, because supposedly in your idea, all of these characters that are trying to basically change Shinji from being the kind of person that he wants to be are supposedly the forces of good in the world. But he makes them come across so shitty. Like, Gendo Akari is not a pleasant person, and I don't think the show ever presents... I don't think the show ever presents him in a way where he could possibly be taken as a good role model.
I think of Gendo, who is like a weird alien for the whole thing. You finally get a tiny bit of humanity from him. I mean, it is tiny, and it's like basically confessing on his deathbed, so it doesn't really count. But you understand him. He's suddenly like, oh, I'm fucking... He has a lot of self-hatred too that he hides. He's like, look, I was never going to be a good father for Shinji, so I thought I could just stay away from him, and that's the best thing I could do. But I obviously fucked up. And then gets this kind of like cosmic, like everyone gets like melted in like an almost like a satisfying way, but he just gets fucking like destroyed, and it's unclear whether that's a projection from instrumentality or that's just the way that he turns to kind of LCL. But I think it's an interesting glimpse into Gendo, and if we're doing this film as like the dark, like this is like dark Shinji, this is like the way it could have gone, then you realize how few steps you need to take from the Shinji of End of Evangelion to the Gendo you see in that moment of just kind of suddenly having a kid that you don't know what to do with, so you just kind of ignore it. Which is kind of what Shinji does the whole film when he's hiding. And I just wanted to mention that moment because I think it is the humanizing Gendo moment that we talked about. Is it in episode 21? But I think it is in this film.
Yeah, to me it just comes across as like his wife has come back and he's just like, I didn't abandon our child because I hated him. It's because I loved him too much.
Yes, I was neglecting our child out of love, not out of thinking he was gross and I didn't want to be near him.
I don't think, like, I think it wouldn't make sense if he was just like evil for no reason, right? Like, if he was just like, I hate Shinji, I'm gonna make him go do this robot thing and not love him. just out of some unknowable, understandable sort of sense of spite. I think it's a lot more reasonable for it to be like, for him to be doing it out of essentially like a fear of having, a relationship.
But he didn't want people to think he was gay. Can't be seen near men. They'll think I'm gay. It's bad enough I have to spend time with Tarkin. I don't know what that guy's name is. He's Grand Moff Tarkin to me.
Oh, I love how you and Johnny like have the same inside jokes about things, because Jonathan always refers to Kaji as the geography teacher, and to that character as Tarkin, and I imagine you do as well, Andrew.
While we're like briefly on the subject of Tarkin, though, he had my favourite quote of like the entire thing, which is "The chamber of guff is opening," which more or less sums up my entire feelings on most of the dialogue or most of the technical dialogue in Neon Genesis Evangelion.
It's a lot of guff, and the chamber is always open.
I did laugh out loud when I heard that line. The chamber of guff is opening. It's God. There's so many terms in this that are like, when I say them out loud, they're so ridiculous. I want to laugh, and nothing is as bad as the Spear of Longinus, which is just the most inherently funny thing to say out loud, if you ask me. The Spear of Longinus.
It's kind of bittersweet. I really liked the moment where I don't know her name, but she's the female one of the, like, I'm going to call them lab assistants, but they're not really lab assistants. Maya. Yeah, when she's about to be souped and Rey is appearing to everyone as either herself or, like, their fantasies, I found it kind of sweet when she turned into, again, don't know her name, the, like, blonde science lady. And they're, like, they have, like, a brief happy moment, even though it's not real, and it's, like, I found that weirdly heartwarming. That was genuinely the only thing in this film that I got even slightly emotional about. But I was just like, that's really nice. That's cool character. That's a cool character moment for like a background character that I've always kind of liked, because she's always the person saying that things are going wrong, and I like that. And yeah, it was nice seeing some more of her character and seeing her be even briefly happy, even if it wasn't like a real sort of happiness. And I found that kind of sweet, and that was the thing I liked. But again, it's gay characters getting like immediately killed or souped the moment you find out that they're gay, so I deduct some points from it for that. But then again, it was 1997. I cut it some slack for being an older thing.
Can't it be more that she just looks up to Akaki as a good role model for her?
I think the line "I need you" is pretty clear.
And it's the fact that when you see like who's showing up for everyone else, it's the people they love.
Yeah.
Except one of maybe it is true for like one of the other lab assistants. I think you see it is literally just Rey that shows up.
Yeah, but I always imagined that as he had no one, so it was just they were just taking him by force, because that's terrifying. There's like 10 Reys while he's cowering. Okay, so some really tiny moments that I like. This isn't a tiny moment at all. It's quite a long kind of 2-minute scene of a child Shinji building a sandcastle before tearing it down. It kind of happens in the transition between the real world and the kind of in his head stuff. Yeah, I really like that. I think that kind of like it's like a really cool piece of visual storytelling. I like the things that you have to interpret. Like I obviously love the final scene. This is just like a really strange visual, but the mass production Ava Rays piercing themselves with the spears before the vagina eye on the forehead of Rey opens up and Unit 1 goes in.
Would it surprise you to learn that was about three separate things on my list of crimes that this film did?
Yeah, it was.
It was also the moment watching the film that I knew Johnny wouldn't like it, because he did a review of Pink Floyd's The Wall, being like, there were too many pieces of vagina imagery, and I was like, oh, he's gonna hate it.
See, that's weird, because I really like Pink Floyd's The Wall and its weird vagina imagery, but this did not appeal to me so much. I mean, possibly it's because I'd already kind of checked out by that point in the film, so I wasn't going to give it any credence. But
yeah, the piercing of the spears, and then they've become like arcs, and then you have the water dripping sideways, whole of Earth turning red with the green kind of things kind of shooting up. All of that, and then the image of the giant kind of Lilith kind of pouring all of the souls into the black egg, I think is probably my favourite visual in the entire film.
I don't know. I am amused by the Rey Evas using spears as weird heart dildos to orgasm. Like it's an amusing moment. It's that moment where when I said in the chat after I'd watched this sort of being like, oh, it's such a horny thing, and just Tony turning around like how could you have got that off it? I was like, what?
I think when you hear horny, you think it's like fan service, right?
Yeah,
and
I don't think anyone's
I think it's
jacking
more like
off
that.
to this.
I don't think anyone's like, oh yeah, that's my taste, you know.
Aside from all the overt yonic and phallic symbolism, that's a new word. That's president in that president. Fucking lost all my cool points just there. That's president in that's present in that scene. That was all right. Tangent. You know the scream Asuka does when she's stabbed in the eye with the spear of Longinus. That's one of the top 5, maybe even top 1 anime screams of all time.
Unless you watch it in fucking English, like an idiot. All of us, apart from Tony,
What
who watch the film in English.
You tell me it's not good in the dub?
It's not as good. Like the Shinji scream as well that is so powerful it makes credits start rolling.
What's the point of having characters have mental breakdowns if they can't scream like they've just had their body twisted apart in real life? You know, that's what you're there for. But yeah, I think one of my favorite visual metaphors in the show is the part where Shinji and Rei are sort of merged together in the sea of soup, you know, because there's the fact that they are joined together. There's you know almost no seam between them, and Shinji realizes that despite the pain it causes people. He wants there to be those walls between people. He wants people to have their individuality. He wants there to be that resistance between people, because it's showed when Rey picks him up, and they hold hands and it doesn't go through. It's a moment of physical contact. I think that summarizes a lot of the idea behind instrumentality as this process where people's barriers are stripped away and are mushed together. That idea, the good and bad of that idea is communicated in that scene, which is really neat. Yeah, as with Harry said, the end of Evangelion does give me a lot of complicated emotions. At times I am do I hate this? Because part of it is very unsettling, and it also does sort of portray a very sort of cynical end for a lot of its characters. There's a magnetism to it that I can't help escape. There's such a sense of scale and wonder with this end of the world apocalypse scene that I've gone back and rewatched countless times. And again, fair enough if you bounce off it. There have definitely been more introspective, more thought-provoking things that I have completely bounced off of, because they didn't have cool scenes where robots punched each other really hard. I think it does have that one hopeful through line that's just enough for me to cling on to be well, there is a little bit of hope at the end of this miserable tunnel, that people will one day be able to understand each other. Anywhere can be heaven if you have the will to live. That's enough there to resonate. And there's a really cool scene where Asuka's in a robot and she punches a lot of other robots really hard. So it's I can't say that it is like I think that does help. That's a lot of the enjoyment. But yeah, I think it's really good. I love that sense of wonder and scale, the cool robot fights, and then there's a lot of like emotional resonance to like the themes it's hitting on. Um, Real cool. I'll give it a 10. 10 out of 10.
Yeah, so for me, this film has some neat ideas, and I think sets out to explore some interesting things. However, it just feels like such a mess to me. Like there's so much that's all over the place that it just ends up detracting from it being a whole sort of cohesive thing. And the moments where it does properly try to explore stuff, it either feels sort of rushed and unnatural when what it's trying to achieve is some sort of like emotional core, or just sort of like the writing just doesn't quite get there. That just it sort of, I don't know. It should have with some of the notes that happen with I mean, this is across more the TV series than the film itself, I guess, technically. But it has a lot of moments where it should, like, everything should be in its favour for emotionally resonating with me with what, like, some of the characters are going through. There is so much I should, and, like, thinking about it later, I'm like, yeah, I really should relate to that, but I don't when watching it. That it just manages to somehow miss what should be a slam dunk of resonating with me. And I think part of that is the kind of that I lose any trust with it being able to go into those subjects, and so don't feel like I can't engage with it on those sorts of terms. And yeah, so the film, the plot gets in the way of the emotions landing. The emotions seem not all to be there in the way that they should be. And then it's all sort of packaged in with this sort of like overuse of especially Ray's body, that of a 14-year-old girl, sort of going throughout, that just sort of makes it the sort of other like bits beside that just sort of, I don't know, creates this feeling of uncomfortableness that to me at least doesn't feel like a thing it was wanting necessarily as a, well, not in the way I felt it should have wanted. Anyway, I'm gonna give it a 3.
Well, we'll get your clone, your spare parts to give it a score now, Andrew. If you're ready.
I was like, I realised that I was going to have to give this a score, and I started panicking because I have not been thinking about how to score it. Like,
I mean, you don't have to.
That's fair enough.
We don't have a place for you on the spreadsheet, so what even is the point?
That's true. Yeah, I mean,
their scores have to add together, so it's a way of inflating it artificially, Harry. This is my plan.
Yeah, I could give it a 0. I don't think it deserves a 0. I mean, I'll quickly summarize like some of my feelings with the TV series and the film, because to me they are
that's a good idea.
very interlinked. This film is basically just 2 replacement ending episodes for the TV series. And broadly speaking, my feeling is that if your TV series needed a film to like explain what was going on in it, your TV series was a bad TV series. And generally speaking, if that's how you're going into things, the film will end up being a bad film too. It gets some points from me because, like, I do now know what the Human Instrumentality Project was, and that was bugging me after having watched the series. So, I can't give it nothing. I have almost an idea what was going on, and in fairness, listening to you guys talk about it and explain things to me has made me realise that there is more depth to it than I was giving it credit for. That being said, I still don't think it was good. I think I would probably give it, I don't know. I'm like, I don't want to give it a 3 because that's exactly what John did. But I want to give it something between a 2 and a 4, and like 3 is between 2 and a 4. So I'm going to give it a 3.
Yeah, 6 out of 10, baby. All right,
See, the
Ethan.
problem is we're both merging a soup, so I'm afraid that's only
Yeah.
a 3 because we're just one entity.
Yeah.
His heart is inside his heart.
Watching the End of Evangelion has collapsed my AT field, and I am now just a sentient puddle of goo on the floor of Jonathan's room.
Oh, man. All right. Ethan, do you want to go?
Yeah.
Wait, I think if I go first, he might give it a 10.
Yes. Just use every technique we can.
Why do you think I might give it a 10 if you go first? Why do you think that?
Because I'm going to convince you with my beautiful soliloquy. Okay, End of Evangelion. I love that Neon Genesis Evangelion has 2 endings. It's the most Evangelion thing in the world to have 2 fucking endings that don't really explain if they go together, if they contradict each other. They kind of just work in this way that I don't know quite how they work, but it just works for me. I really like both endings, as I've said in this podcast. I think to make an artistic point, he kind of throws Shinji under the bus. He character assassinates my boy Shinji, but I like the catharsis that every other character gets. I love some of the imagery. I love this weird, melancholic, yet kind of like, oh, this is really cool, but it's really fucked up kind of feeling this film gives me. From the opening scene, which is one of the most uncomfortable scenes I've ever seen in anything. It feels like a fucking Lars von Trier film when you're watching it, and you're like, this is fucking anime. What the fuck? And then as it goes on, you kind of have the as Ethan keeps bringing out this like awesome kind of action stuff that gets twisted with the kind of watching all the characters that you've come to know and love, like, dislike, feel ambivalent to, whatever, throughout 24 to 26 episodes. I think that it's a really good film. I think it's a really bold film, but it's definitely one of those things. I like Persona, actually. This isn't just me trying to get Ethan to give it a 10. I'm going to compare it to Persona. So the first time I watched Persona, I was so struck by what I'd seen and how kind of bold it was and how conflicted I felt about it. But I kind of settled on the fact, like, look, I think this is one of those extreme examples that it's a 1 or a 10. And it's probably a 10 if I'm asking the question. And I think this is a 10.
I like the idea if you began this going, I know, let me go first so I can convince Ethan it's a 10, and then you go, yeah, it's a 1.
You can give it. I'll be happy if he gives it a 1 as well. To be honest, Johnny, I thought you'd give it a 1. I thought you'd think the show is okay and hate the film. I thought Ethan would think that both are good. That was my prediction going into this podcast.
Whereas I doubt it. I doubted that because I don't think Jonathan is the kind of person that, because he dislikes it so much, that he would give it a 1. I think that Jonathan's always been good at finding at least something in it that he likes.
Yeah,
you know,
I mean, the
something.
only one I've ever given
Vertigo.
is for... oh, yeah, I guess Vertigo. But in terms of anime, it's... Devilman Crybaby.
You're not a fan of apocalypses, Jono, and the world ending. I see.
I'm just not a fan of bad philosophy, like faux depth.
And
Yeah, I am very
gratuitous
pretentious
Yeah.
though, so I like all the pseudo intellectual kind of stuff, the vague religious imagery that kind of means nothing but looks cool. I like reading Wikipedia pages about themes and being like, oh cool. I like watching Ending Explained videos and being like, oh yeah, I totally understood that the first time. I like
This
the.
is what was really going on with Shinji in the hospital.
Yeah, I was like, I thought it was meant to be good, you know. I was fucking horny.
I wasn't jacking off.
What? And then you got really creeped out at the bit where it went live action, and the camera just zooms out, and it just showed you there, like a video of you jacking off to that scene, and you're like, oh my god.
Now that
I'm
would have
so
been
fucked up.
something. If the live action thing had just been unedited footage of someone masturbating to watching like the actual TV series, that would have been some hard hitting satire.
Yeah, I like this film a lot for various reasons. I think honestly, you could go frame by frame and just dig out so many like hidden details and nuggets. Like every time I watch it, there's like 10 things I've never clocked before that are either pieces of imagery, pieces of foreshadowing, just really clever and inventive pieces of animation and tricks that it's so dense. It's like the first time through, like it's just kind of flashes past for me. I as depressed as it makes me, I do kind of want to keep revisiting this film and keep digging into all these kind of like small, like minute, like moments and details that I think make up it as a whole. So it's stuff like that. It's these tiny details that as a white, that all in kind of tandem give me this immense kind of confused feeling about the film that I really appreciate. And I want to keep digging in and finding out why it's pulling these reactions out of me. And I've tried to explain it, and I've done a really bad job. I feel like these Evangelion podcasts, I've been at my worst in terms of podcasting. I've been awful, just fucking monologuing. But I'm trying. I'm in my own therapy. I'm in my own head. And the Japanese is going like, why do you like Evangelion? And I'm trying to tell you, but it's hard.
I don't know.
So yeah, I'm going to give it a 10. There you go, 10 out of 10.
Nice.
It's all right. None of us actually hate you. You're fine. I think you're pretty good.
You're gonna either you're all gonna applaud me, or we're gonna wake up on the beach together and I'm gonna struggle.
Harry, why do you record the Animediate podcast?
I do it because you praise me. You praise me when I record the podcast.
I think Andrew is actually really spot on when he talks about how he thinks of the film as an extension of the series. They're kind of the same thing, and I have the same thing as well. I think the film's very good, but 90% of why I like it is because I had 26 episodes before that ramped everything up to the point where instrumentality began, and it just wouldn't be what it was without that. I mean, I remember reading the Netflix plot description for End of Evangelion and thinking, my God, if anyone just read that without having watched any of the show, they would just be like, wow, they really throw you into the deep end very quickly.
Yeah. If you go on Letterboxd and then like filter the reviews for the film by lowest to highest, like a quarter of those that are down there are people going, I watched it because it was in the IMDb top 250. No,
That's really
Poor
funny.
souls.
That's really, really funny.
Yeah.
But I think with Neon Genesis Evangelion, what it does for me more than anything is I thought I'd made my mind up about anime, honestly. Harry talks about how he had his anime arc, and I kind of feel like I've had mine, where I think for a while I was pretty certain that the only non-Ghibli anime that I would like was Perfect Blue. And Neon Genesis Evangelion, End of Evangelion is basically just contradicts that completely because I think it's a great film. And I don't have the experience with anime that you guys have where you can compare it to things like Cowboy Bebop, which I'm sure is as good or even better, and other shows where you're used to anime being quite profound when it wants to be, quite deep when it wants to be, having substance when it wants to be, being introspective and reflective when it wants to be, asking important questions when it wants to be, and I'm so used to anime not doing that. So when I come along and I watch something like this entire series, it causes me to reevaluate how I feel about the entire subgenre, and it's quite a big thing to say out loud because anime is this. It's a massive it's a massive genre of cinema and TV, and then these 26 episodes in film have made me realize that anime can be so much more when it wants to. I thought all it really ever was good for was just big, super dramatic fights and era manga sensei pervy content that's just very kind of lewd, and I didn't think it would really be much more than that, so it wouldn't interest me. And Neon Genesis Evangelion is a show about kids fighting in giant robots, and on the surface it sounds like so many action blockbusters that I've seen time and time again that have completely failed to leave any mark on me. But this one, because it has that added layer, because it has episodes 25 and 26 mainly, it's left something on me, and I'm sure I'll return to it one day. But I think when it comes to this film, I'll probably give it a 9 out of 10 because I think it's fantastic. I don't think it's as good as the show, though. I don't think it's as good as the show, and I think it's the ending that does it for me. I'm glad that for me, I probably have the most. silver-lined interpretation of what the ending means. I think most people, I mean, like you, like Andrew and Jonathan, for instance, think it's a lot more depressing than I do. Having said that, I still think the last two episodes of the show, because of how overwhelmingly positive they are, leads me to prefer the ending of that, I think, overall, more than the ending of the film. So that's why I'm going to give it a 9.
That's good. Ethan, Harry, congratulations on your breaking your record for your synchrograph ratings. You've managed to synchronize with your Avas, more than ever before.
100%.
Jono, Andrew need a bit of work. I don't know. You might need to have a scene where you see a ghost of your mother before you can really get moving.
Right, I am completely understanding of why Jonathan and Andrew don't think that this is all that. Like, everything that they've said is just a viewpoint, and I'm completely. I see their point of view. Definitely, I don't think anything they've said is wrong.
There are podcasts we do, like The Godfather, where I'm like, I just don't understand this. But Evangelion, I'm like, oh yeah, I totally get this. Like,
yeah. No, I'm pleased that after I watched it for a second time, I was like, there's no way anyone has ever enjoyed this, and it has been really good hearing you explain like what you like about it, what you think is interesting, what you think the meaning of it is, and I have found that, I don't know, interesting to hear, and yeah, it's good. I can see why people do like this. And
it was something interesting I found as well because as well as looking at the worst reviews for this on Letterboxd, I also looked at the most positive ones, and it is a lot of people that have like emotionally connected to this film, have sort of used it as a jumping off point to like start noticing stuff about themselves, and it just seems so weird to me because it's like it feels so obtuse in order to try and do that, really. But I don't know. Yeah, I guess I'm glad that people have had such connections with this film, and it is a moment where you're like, Hans, are we the baddies? Like, are we wrong about this? 'Cause when I'm here saying that I think the writing gets in the way of like being able to get an emotional like connection to it, and I'm like, I am like the 1% of people that think that.
I mean, like the ending to the TV series where Shinji learns not to hate himself, like, I'm a cynical bastard, but like, that's a nice sentiment, and I can see that would help people. That's like, that's not I think it's a bit maybe trite. I think it's potentially, oversimplifying the complexities of depression or whatever it is that Shinji is going through. But at the same time, it's like, it's not a bad message that, don't hate yourself, don't assume other people hate you. It's just a weird way to end a series that's been about robots fighting and, cool conspiracy theories and stuff. But it's not. There are some really good pieces in it, and
I see what you're saying completely, and I'm not trying to imply anything about how depression affects people. I'm not trying to do that at all. But how else would you cure your own depression if it isn't through self-love? I know it has to be a gradual process that takes a very, very long time. But how else would you do it?
I'm not saying that's not the path to it. I just feel like trying to compress all of that into a 20-minute episode of an anime series is maybe bad pacing. Which, in fairness, I know they were like rushed for time, and they didn't have the opportunity to make it exactly how they wanted, and that's I can't criticize them too much for that. That was beyond their control. But
yeah, well, I think how I sort of got over one of my like really dark patches was that there was no moment where like I had some self-realization of I don't really hate myself sort of bit. It was just there was a day like several probably months on from the moment things started getting better when I realized, oh, I'm in a much better place now. And so it seems so alien and unrelating that like Shinji just has this like click.
Shinji is like bad cop bullied into getting over his depression by voices asking him questions and people saying that they. But we're getting into relitigating the TV series, and we were meant to be wrapping up. I had like one other tiny point, which is just that the ending of like the end of Evangelion is basically just one of the endings of Mass Effect 3. And I don't have anywhere to go with that. I just wanted to point that out because that's the only thing I had left to say.
I guess we should start ending it there then. Thank you all for watching. Hope you've enjoyed the Animediate journey. You know, I think this has been an interesting emotional arc. I feel like I've like trained up like 3 students, and Jono's gonna be the one that like betrays us and kills me and Ethan and Harry go on their quest for revenge. And they punch robots along the way and have sad moments. Yeah, I think Evangelion is definitely one of those shows that just in the end has inspired me with a lot of awe and wonder, and that's, you know, something that I think only anime can get across as well as it does. So thank you all for watching.
This is going to be a nightmare to edit.
All right, it's time for this podcast to return to nothing.